This is going to be a quick beginner's guide to Substance Designer for making textures for any kind of low res, old school, diffuse only, Quake. If we make a brick, it looks something like this. Something old, medieval, swampy, from scratch. So just hit File New. I'm going to name it T_Tutor. I'm going to leave the width and height at 128. You can go larger and scale down if you want. I just like seeing my pixels. So I'm going to start by adding a tile generator, which looks something like this. One thing to note about the tile generator is the input. The current pattern is on brick. For this tutorial I'll be using a square, but there's discs, all kinds of different shapes by default that you can just put in. And you can also use an image input, because there's an input you can do the pattern, and you can increase the number. So you could literally put anything in here, which is really powerful, but we'll just be using a square for now. And first thing we need to do is adjust the intersect up just a little bit so we can see it work. But actually, I want to change the amount to be a 2 by 4. So it's like kind of like a standard brick there, and let me show you that interslice again. This basically controls the width between the bricks, or either blank space or grout, whatever you want to call it. For this, I'm just going to make it tight enough so it's like a pixel. And then I want to offset it by 0.5. So you have like a standard stacked brick. Now, this is a simple height map of just solid black, solid white. So since this is diffuse only, we need to get a little bit of a you can plug this height right into a normal. I'm going to increase that intensity to 10. So you can see there's a normal map. But we won't be using normal maps at all. But the benefit is this. The normal map creates lighting information from 2 directions. Well, 3 technically, but we'll just be using 2. And those are in the RGB. So we need the RGB split, or RGBA split, as seen here. We'll need to invert the green channel because the information is coming from below, so now it's coming from above. And then blend the green and red channels together. I'm just going to cut that opacity in half. And there you have a basic embossed brick. And that's as basic a brick texture as you can get. Let me clean these nodes, position them just a little bit, because this is my embossed sort of light information, and then this is my brick information. Now, if I go back to the initial brick, you can see if I adjust the pattern, you can see how things can change really quickly and be all kinds of different brick sizes and whatnot. And I could adjust the offset. So it's really powerful, and there's a lot of options here. But one thing we want to do is, see how this is just a single pixel line? We want to make this brick appear to be softer, have more height. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create a blur. Actually, if you hit, let me backspace, I didn't want that. If you hit spacebar, it'll bring up common ones, but you can also type into the search a blur. You'll see all these different types of blur. I'm just going for blur high quality grayscale, or HQ. I plug that directly in, you can see it's just very, very blurry. Just to show you, this is the final result of that. Oh, and one thing I want to do real quick is add a levels, an auto levels, just so I can get some stronger contrast to see it a little better. So yeah, that's a really blurry brick. we don't want that. We want the intensity default to be much lower, like around 0. And we start moving up, you can see how it starts to get like a bigger sort of brick shape, which is pretty great. But we don't want to get too crazy. Usually what I would do for a step like this, and again, a lot of this changes depending on the exact type of material you're trying to create. Like if you want it to be a newer, crispy brick, keep this low. But if you want it to be old and weathered, round it off a lot more, erosion. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to blend 2 of these with the blend. And if you don't know what a blend node is basically like 2 layers in Photoshop. You take 2 images, bring them together, and then you have the opacity adjustments. Then it has very common like Photoshop layers like overlay, multiply, etc. And it also has an opacity input. We'll cover that very soon. But any sort of alpha type image you can use to blend between 2. So let's get right back to it. So I want to blend these 2. I want to have a very blurry kind of top, so you can see if it kind of rounds off the shape of the brick a bit. That looks pretty good. I'd like to keep some of the sharpness, but still have a bit of height information. And this will change as we move forward too. I'm going to go back and adjust this, build it up a bit more. One thing I want to do is blend it again with the original. See the final, so I can have a little bit more control. Yeah, I still want that kind of crispiness of the edges. So if this, so I've got 3 blurs here. I've got a nice soft blur, a little bit of crispiness still, and the bigger height information. So this actually looks pretty good as far as a brick goes. I mean, it needs texture information like cracks, scratches, and grunge, weather, and color. So let's just go right into color or grunge, because I already searched for the word noise here, and got this big stack of all kinds of fun noises and effects to play with. So I like these grunges. I'm just going to pick one grunge, and I'm going to use these cracks. I'm going to keep this really simple right now, because normally when I do things that are much more advanced, but for this tutorial we need to keep it simple, easy to understand. So let's just blend. I'm going to blend these cracks of this. Just drop the opacity and see how that looks. That's okay, the contrast is a little high, so I can easily just drop that, and want more cracks, and again a little less contrast. So because you have too much contrast, the repeating tiling nature can be a bit strong. So if I take what I've this brick and simply either multiply or overlay this grunge. Let's see, I'll just multiply it. And I'll throw another auto levels on top of that. That's not bad. It looks pretty good, really. But one thing that it lacks is height information, lighting information from the grunge itself, or cracks and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is add that to the height information here, and you can see that's just the raw grunge in there. So what I want to do here is I'll multiply it, and I'll drop the opacity. I just want a little bit of this information, not too much. And that looks pretty good. We got a little bit of highlights. Now if we come back to here with the grunge overlaid, which adds a bit more texture and value. That looks somewhere around here, looks pretty good. I'll end up adjusting this a bit. But there's one little thing, one little step I'd like to do again to the bricks. The bricks still have like really straight lines, very planar. So one great way to handle that is to use a warp, a directional warp with a noise. I want to use a purlin noise. If I plug that directly in, you'll see what that does. It just, I need to adjust the angle so it gets both of it. As you can see, it just from 0 just really warps it and bends it up. Now this isn't what we want. I want to keep this a bit more subtle, so that and let me adjust the scale of the noise a bit to be smaller. So this gives the bricks like a rough, coarse edge. Like if you were to run your hand across it, it would feel very rough and bumpy. Let's just look at that. Yeah, so that breaks them up quite a bit. But one other thing is, let's do a larger scale version of this. Make it much, whoops, not that, this scale being very much larger, so that we're getting some bigger warps and distortion on the brick. We don't want this to be too intense as to interfere with the actual tile, but just a little bit. And when you put the two together, you get kind of a nice warping distortion of the brick. And you know, that looks pretty good. It's strong texture, a lot of value, a lot of height information. But one thing that kind of bothers me is that the cracks, it's tough to see because the cracks detail is kind of small, but actually one thing I can do to illustrate this a little better is, whoops, wrong direction. Scale this up a little bit. Well, yeah, it doesn't hold up very well. So let me just go ahead and remove that. That is, the cracks are running across the bricks, so they're not. They should be individual. It's tough to see, but you could notice it on. So if I go back to my original tile generator, I'm going to go to the luminance random and raise that up pretty high, so it makes these height variations. And I'm going to offset and blend my grunge with itself. So I'll offset it by like 0.5. And then I'll use this luminance here. I needed to remove those interslice lines, so it's solid colors. Make this the opacity. So now you can see it's creating more variation and breaking it up. I need to do a slight levels adjustment here to make this a bit more intense. That should be better. There we go. Yeah. So now the actual grunge is offset as well to match the bricks. Let's just plug that in here and plug that information into the height. Now that's looking a little better. I would say I could probably go straight into color. Now what we're going to do here to add color to this, there's a few methods you could do. One, you could just color your grunge and overlay that. That's pretty good. You could just go back to your brick itself, take the highlights and the shadows and separate those with like a histogram and apply colors to those, so you get like unique colors for highlights and shadows and unique colors for grunge. But we're going to do something quick here. What we're going to do is just add a gradient map to this. And luckily it's just the top one. So gradient maps basically take the information so that the darkest color to the brightest color just grows across this map of information. So if I select like this top end and say you're red now, and I go to the bottom end and I make it just like blue. Let's do something a little darker so it's easier to understand. So that's kind of how that works. And I'll just pick a color in the middle that's way different too, so you can kind of see how the gradient map works. So that's pretty nice. What we need to do is pick a proper gradient map and not what the predator would see if he looked at it. This thermal vision. So to pick your colors, I suggest using real-world reference. Pick colors from that. It's usually going to get a better result. Or let's say you're working in a game that has a palette or a limited color palette, like a Quake or something. You can open up a texture that you like the way it looks. Pick colors from that. That works really well. What I'm going to do is I'm going to load the Quake palette. I should have just linked it instead of import, but no big deal. Set that to 128. Whoops. And what I'm going to do is just pick lines from the palette. So for this first one, I'll just go pick gradient. And I'll take this, so I don't need the top row because it's already black and white. So I'll just pick the second row. And if you click and hold shift, whoops, let me redo that. If you click and shift, well, if you shift and click, sorry, you get this nice arrow. Easier than dragging across. So boom, you get that. And the result texture is pretty much one solid line from the palette. Looks good, looks alright, but it is monotone. It's a single line. You want something with more color. So what I usually do in this situation is let's get the palette back up here for easy to pick colors. It's taking its time. Computing. There it is. Go to pick color picker, and I'm just going to pick a few that I know I'm going to use. Like I know I'm going to end up using this green because it's a real strong, really nice green. Duplicate it again. Let me just go ahead and dupe it one more time, so I'll get 4 different ones here. I'd like to I'll pick this brown here. And I really like this green. It seems to work really well. This green here. So now we've got this brown, this kind of greeny brown, this strong algae-ish green, and this lighter green. Now I want this lighter green to be something like my base. Don't know if I'll use this one, but I'll mix it with the. I'm going to mix it this with this via a blend. Now there's a few ways to mix this. For example, we can go back to one of our many noises. Pick something with relatively good contrast. Let me see, cells is okay. I'm going to drop that in and plug that into the opacity so you can see how that works. You can play with scale, disorder. You can get a lot of really fun colors by messing with this. Let's get a little more scale. And you can play with the opacity, but this is fine. Another good thing to use for opacity here is this luminance of the bricks. So if I plug this into the opacity, see how it just gets, it's almost like brick for brick changes. That works really well, and I use that a lot. But you know, I'm kind of digging this right now, so I'm just gonna go with that. That's fun. And I want to do one more blend. Where I put this hard mossy green over it, and I use this grunge, a real streaky grunge, like this is the opacity. So I get these green streaks, like moss weather. Again, we're getting a lot of good color out of this. You want to play with opacity, and feel free to do whatever you want, you know, blending modes and whatnot. You can get a lot of interesting stuff out of this. But again, I'm just keeping this simple. This is a basics tutorial. So I mean, from there you're pretty much done. You need to create an output. And for this output, I'm going to name it 01 because this Tutor is called 01. And if I export it, there, yeah, I should have that folder already up. Yes, Tutor01 PNG, and there it is. There's my older version. So yeah, that's done pretty much. Now let's do something real quick. You can make many outputs. So here's one without the streaks. So there's with streaks, without streaks, and we'll just call this 02. So now, if I export the bitmaps, it exports these as tutorial_01 and 02. So if I export outputs, see now I have two textures already named, proper formatting, everything. It's perfect. You can do that for other parts as well. Like, so let's say, let's put out those two bricks, and let's do this for a quick bit of fun. I'm going to plug my grunge into here, and then I'm just going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to need to level this a bit. That might be too dark. A little too dark. So let me just do an auto level for now, see how that works. That's comparable. I think the strength is a bit high, or the intensity of the cracks. So I'm just going to kick that down a little bit. Whoop. Yeah. Then I'm going to create another output. Call this one 03. So now I'll have brick with moss, and then just like a flat solid one. I'm going to go ahead and export those. And I want to do one more thing just to show you. So I had this brick. We talked about this briefly a minute ago, but if I go back to this original brick, remember the X and Y amount. See, I can adjust this, and so now I've got like horizontal trims. Now I've got a larger brick pretty much instantly. You know, I can change things up really fast and get a lot of variations quite quickly. Yeah, adjust it this way. Yeah, actually, let's just do this. If I do a quick, maybe a 3 for 3 or a 4 for 4, let's see how they look. I'll just go with a 4 4. A nice little 4 4 tile. And I'll need to adjust the intersect a little bit to bring it. There it is. So that's kind of like a flat tile. So where did this go? To do in the grunge. So I'm going to do this real quick. So we had already 3, so I'm just going to call this 04 and 05. And now I want to export. So now we have, there's better ways to do that, I'm just doing something quick. So now we have 5 textures. So let me see here. I'm just going to go into text mix, file new, close this. I think this works. I might need to change the format. Yeah, let me do this instead. Just use the import button. That actually works. Go to my Quake folder. Well, I might need to do. Oh, so I gotta do them individually? Oh no. 2, 2, 1. Really? Okay. Well, sorry about that. Let me just go back to Substance and change the format to TGA, export, make this 201, change the brick back to 2, bring the inner slice down a smidge, offset at 0.5. Now we're back where we were. Where's 2? There it is. Export, targish. Try this again. Okay, Tutor 1. There we go. Now we're cooking. So these all now have the Quake palette in here. Let's remap. Let's save this as 2:1. Hop over to Trench Broom in this little test area I've got here. Load up some wads. Tutor wad. Let's go ahead and select everything. Make it this brick. Let's see. I'm gonna make this floor this tile here. Walls are this brick. Let's make these doors this solid color. These textures are kind of gamey, but they seem fun. Again, this is just for a quick tutorial. Compile and load it in Arcane Dimensions for some reason. So yeah, there we go. Let me I don't think I'm recording audio, so it doesn't matter. So these all look pretty good. So yeah, you get the idea. It's really quick, simple bricks, simple tiles. Yeah.